Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, supposedly going to take place on July 20th in Arlington, Texas, and will air on Netflix. Now, I'm not even going to break this down technically because I do not consider Tyson versus Paul to be a valid pro boxing fight. Let's just call it a combat sports event. But I will say this is like matching a high-level black belt who's a former world champion and complete icon in the sport versus someone who is effectively no more than a yellow belt. And yes, I'm saying Jake Paul is a yellow belt in boxing. Now, I come from a judo background in Canada where we have white, yellow, orange, green, blue, brown, and black. So, yes, yellow is just a very advanced beginner. And I feel like I'm being generous giving Jake Paul a yellow belt because for me to promote my students to yellow belt, I'm insistent that they are able to execute a move in competition, whether it's a throw or a pin for the full amount of time to win the match. Now, Jake Paul, even though he has 10 fights on record, well, I'll break down his record in a moment, but the problem with Jake Paul is that he is a beginner. Like I would say he's, like I said, either a white belt or yellow belt, but he tries to do black belt moves, and that is an absolute mistake. So for example, in one of his more recent fights, if you look at some of Jake Paul's more recent fights, he tries to do what we call a check, either a check left hook or basically a one-punch counter knockout punch. That's exactly the wrong tactic for a beginner fighter to take. A beginning fighter should be trying to work their offensive move. As we like to say, let your hands go. Let the combinations fly. That's the only way you're going to learn them effectively, and you're going to know that you can actually land them in a fight situation. It's absolutely, it's a high-level black belt move to be able to throw a one-punch counter and get a knockout. That's not something I would ever encourage someone who's starting out their career to try. Even though it looks really cool and you see other high-level people doing it, you shouldn't try to do black belt moves when you're a white belt or an orange belt. Maybe when you're a brown belt, that's the time you could start trying it, but Jake is way too inexperienced to be doing those types of things. Okay, so now the talking point for this fight, it seems, amongst the younger folks is that, oh my God, Mike Tyson's like almost 60. He's way too old. He's just going to get killed. Jake Paul is only 27. And of course, youth likes to kind of support other youth and think that, old age is going to be the main factor here and that it's actually a negative. But the thing is, in this case, Mike is going to be 58 by the time July rolls around, but he has decades of elite level combat experience. Jake Paul really is just smoke and mirrors with his 10 fights on paper. So the advantage goes to Mike Tyson in a sort of infinite sense, because Tyrone Woodley said something like, Mike Tyson's forgotten 10 times more than Jake Paul knows about boxing, and I'll take that even further. I'll say, Mike Tyson has forgotten infinitely more than Jake Paul will ever know, because Jake Paul's never going to put himself through the same whole amateur experience that Mike Tyson went through. Remember, Mike went to the Olympic Games as the sparring partner for Evander Holyfield. I think that was at the insistence of Cus D'Amato at the time. And then, of course, we know Mike made it to the absolute top of the heavyweight division and ruled there for a while. I guess a lot of these younger folks just never had the opportunity to see Mike fight in live time, but maybe some of you folks remember this commercial that used to air where two young guys are kind of sitting on the couch watching TV, and one of them says to the other, "Oh yeah, I'd fight him for like, I don't know what it was, like $10 million. I'd fight Mike Tyson." And his friend just looks at him like he's crazy, like, "No, you wouldn't." And then, the screen flashes to like an imaginary scene of the guy standing across from Mike Tyson in the ring, and then the bell rings, and then suddenly you hear a bang, and you see this kid's head bouncing across the ring, right? Like Mike just literally took his head off. I can't remember what that commercial was for, but it's like, that's kind of like how we viewed Mike Tyson at that time. And so does his age play a factor? Yes, it does, but it's almost to his favor because he has such a well-developed, incredible skill set. And I believe because he also spent a lot of time doing weight training, that weight training was like an investment in the bank for Mike to kind of preserve his body. And I'll assume he's maintained himself over the years, so it's like at this point in life he's able to get kind of returns on his investment. It's like when you lift like that, as you get older, you're actually getting compound interest on your workouts. All right, so let's take a look at, in spite of being 58, where Mike Tyson is actually at in terms of his physicality at the moment. And I'm sure you guys have seen the footage he put out of himself training with Rafael Cordero, where Cordero has on that body shield and is holding mitts, and Mike is just driving him straight backwards, stepping in, slipping under, or weaving under Cordero's punches that he throws, and then smashing punches into Cordero's body, and then to the head on Cordero's mitts. So let's break that down. Even though it's just obviously a very short sequence of a matter of seconds, Mike is executing skills there that are very high level. Here's why. It would take most of us breaking that apart to be able to even approach doing that drill effectively. So what I mean by that is, maybe first you would practice throwing body punches and head punches and coordinating the torque behind that. Because you don't want to just throw arm punches to the body and arm punches to the head. Mike's really twisting his torso into the punch. That's why he gets leverage on his shots. So you have to be able to practice those, left hand to the body, right hand at the head, or right hand to the body, left hand to the head, or left body, left head, right body, right head. Okay, the next thing Mike's doing is, of course, he's weaving under Cordero's punches. That's a whole separate skill set. So now you've got to practice that separately, just bobbing and weaving, say with the slip bag, as Mike made good use of. And then you can add the weave and a punch, a weave and a punch, and then you're going to add a weave and two punches. Finally, now we add the footwork. So you're taking steps, weaving and throwing punches, taking more steps, weaving, throwing punches. This is a lot harder than it sounds, and Mike does it so quickly, the level of difficulty might be lost on some people, but there'll be imitators out there who could do those skills in that order, but I guarantee you their punches are not going to be effective. They're just sort of going through the motions, because the whole key behind that whole sequence is getting leverage on the punches. And I guarantee you right now Jake Paul can't do that, and my guess is he never will be able to do that. So that's just one point, is that Mike Tyson has an immense skill set and knows how these punches should feel if done properly. Jake doesn't even know that at this point. Okay, so let's take a look at just overall conditioning and being in shape. Well, Mike knows how to lift weights specifically to complement his boxing. Mike has lifted weights. He's done heavyweight work, good, decent weight work since he was, I think, probably in his teens, maybe his early 20s. But you can find old footage of him working out in the weight gym, doing leg presses, using the free weights and dumbbells. And in the most recent footage, I've seen him doing seated tricep extensions with the cable. So reaching back and extending the cable forward. That's pretty cool to see him doing that because the tricep is the muscle that helps you get the snap on your punch, because it's the muscle group that helps you finish the punch. Most people want to focus on their biceps, but triceps are critical for boxers. Okay, so now the other thing is, quite honestly, I think Jake Paul, given who he is, which is a social media influencer, let's face it, he works out to look good. He needs to look good on social media. He needs to have the washboards and the big delts, but I don't think he has what we call mature muscle. One way you can tell if somebody's made their big deltoids by actually picking up the iron and not by sticking a needle or swallowing a pill is take a look at their forearms, because if you're going to do it naturally, the only way to do it is to pick up the dumbbell or the barbell and lift it, right? So how do you do that? Well, you got to grab it with your hands, and that means you're developing your forearms at the same time. But if you see someone who has big, what I call balloon deltoids, and very little definition in their forearms, I'm always suspicious. Plus, you can just tell by the quality of their deltoid, it just literally looks like it's inflated. There's no striations, there's no definition. That's nice. You got your size and your cuts from other means other than just hard work. All right. So, Jake can do as many PEDs as he wants. It's absolutely not going to help him in the ring. So to answer in a nutshell, in terms of game plan, which is kind of ridiculous, right? What should Mike Tyson do against Jake Paul? Well, what should a high-level black belt do with a yellow belt? The answer is anything they want. I mean, just make sure you're in shape and you're up for the fight, and you should be able to execute whatever the heck you want against somebody where there's such a vast spread in terms of knowledge base, experience base, skill base, all of the above. Okay, so now let's talk about the logistics of this actual event. Well, as of right now, we're in mid-March. The event's not for almost 4 months, scheduled for July. As of right now, there's nothing showing on BoxRec nor on the Texas Labor Department's website, the TDLR. Now, in Texas, professional fighters are given their license, are issued licenses by the Department of Labor, not by an athletic commission. So that's why I'm referring to the TDLR. Now, granted, they only list events right now for March and April. So I'm suspecting that they haven't even sort of officially approved this event yet. Their next meeting is going to be in April. It's either April 12th or 14th, and perhaps the Tyson Jake Paul event will come up on the agenda for their approval at their board meeting in April. In either case, in order for this to get approved as a professional fight, they have to take into consideration not so much Mike's age, because that is a factor, but also the disparity in experience. Now, here's the real issue. It's that Jake Paul, even though he's 9-1, he really only has that one fight, which was that one loss to Tommy Fury as a legitimate boxing fight. His very first fight, he fought a YouTuber and won. Then he fought the basketball player and won. Then he fought retired MMA fighters, four different fights, and won those. Okay. Then he lost to Tommy Fury. He comes back and he fights Nate Diaz, sort of semi-retired MMA fighter. And then Jake Paul's two most recent fights are first-round knockouts versus two unknown boxers with winning records. But take a closer look at those two boxers that Jake Paul fought. They are, in fact, what I call professional opponents. What that means is they get a bunch of wins versus people with absolute losing records. In other words, they fight the tomato cans to build up their record, and then they turn around and fight somebody to cash out. In this case, I'm sure they got paid decent money to fight Jake Paul. These are a necessary part of the boxing equation, and there are managers out there who will invest in these types of guys because they know if they just pump their record up to get a certain number of W's at a certain point, that manager can then turn around and cash out on this fighter by letting him lose against somebody who's willing to pay a lot of money for it. So I'm sure none of this would be lost on the TDLR. It's just a question of, how many legit rounds of boxing versus boxers do they want Jake Paul to have? Because at this point he has 8 versus Tommy Fury, and then sort of parts of 1 round each. So we'll round it up. We'll say he has 10 rounds of boxing experience. Is that enough for them to justify sanctioning a fight versus Mike Tyson? Now, to address Mike Tyson's age and the requirements of the TDLR for Mike Tyson to get a license, well, because he is, as they say, over the age of 35, they can subject him to additional medical tests. So any boxer in Texas has to do the blood test, which is Hep B and C with surface antigens, HIV, ophthalmology, dilated pupil exam, an overall physical exam with a neurological component. And the TDLR will ask anyone who's over the age of 35 to get additional medical tests, as they say, including but not limited to an EEG, which is a brain test, and an EKG, which is for your heart. So I think that Mike would pass those medical tests with no issue. I honestly think the bigger issue is Jake Paul's lack of valid pro boxing experience. So then the next question is, well, will they license it or will they allow it as an exhibition? And that may be the wisest move for Jake overall, because if it's an exhibition and not a fight, then both fighters could use larger gloves. They could probably ask to use headgear, but I think that would not look good for Jake Paul if he decided he wanted to wear headgear. But it'd be completely valid to wear 16s or 20s as heavyweights doing an exhibition. You could also make the rounds shorter. You could also ask a referee to sort of intervene more and give standing 8s or that kind of thing. Err on the side of caution and safety in terms of the fighter's well-being. So, as I said, I don't consider Tyson versus Paul to be a valid pro boxing fight. I don't think it should be, just because I think that's way too risky for Jake Paul. But I could see an exhibition. Now, a lot of younger folks especially question, well, what's Mike Tyson even doing this for? He's way too old. He already has a lot of money. And the answer is, twofold. One, he's not doing it for the money. I think it gives him a personal goal to work towards. Let's face it, Mike is programmed as an athlete. He's programmed as a fighter, and I think he enjoys having a hard deadline to work towards to get himself in the best shape he knows how. And the second thing is, there may be business with Netflix that Mike wants to pursue. Who knows? I'm going to assume that there's other sort of business ventures buried underneath this fight, whatever that may be. So it's probably not the money itself, but it's just the opportunity and the openings that Mike fighting on Netflix would create for his other businesses. And of course for Jake Paul, he needs to fight somebody of status. He figures this is a good shot, right? Because it's an older guy who was a legit boxer and has a huge name in the sport. But Jake's just counting on the fact that because Mike is more than double his age, that it'll be a lot easier for him. I don't think that's a safe bet, personally. But tell me what you guys think. Are you willing to pay? How much would you be willing to pay to watch Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul? Are you going to watch this? Or do you feel that, boxing sold its soul a long time ago, and so you personally boycott these types of things? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for listening.